It was a quiet evening in the Stormlands when Lady Catelyn Stark rode into Renly Baratheon's camp. The sun was going down behind the hills, casting a soft golden glow over the tents. Flags with the golden stag waved in the wind, and knights trained nearby in the yard, their armor shining like stars. Catelyn looked tired, her face pale from long travel, but her voice was steady. She was here to speak of peace, or war. Renly Baratheon, younger brother of King Robert, was charming as ever. His green eyes sparkled as he welcomed Catelyn. "Lady Stark," he said with a smile, offering her wine, "I've heard much of your strength. Let us speak honestly." Catelyn wasted no time. "My son Robb is now king in the north. He does not want the Iron Throne. He only wants justice for his father's death and peace for his people. If you truly wish to wear the crown, perhaps there is a way to stand together." Renly leaned back, amused. "Your son declares himself a king, yet he wants peace. Strange times we live in." She didn't smile. "Strange, yes. But he has 20,000 swords and a cause people believe in. And you have an army too, stronger than Stannis's, younger than Joffrey's, and better liked than both. What could we accomplish if we stood side by side?" Renly considered her words more seriously this time. He knew his brother Stannis was stubborn, and King's Landing had already turned cruel under Queen Cersei and Joffrey. Robb Stark was young, but stories of his victories travelled fast. He had beaten the Lannisters twice in battle, and more importantly, the people were starting to see him as a leader, a wolf with honor. That night, Renly sat alone in his tent, thinking. His wife, Margaery Tyrell, entered and sat beside him. "The Starks are proud," she said softly, "but their loyalty could win us the North. My father would welcome such an alliance. It would make your claim stronger." Renly looked at her and nodded slowly. "Then we do it. We make peace with the North." And so it was done. Renly met with Robb Stark not long after, and in front of their bannermen they shook hands. Robb offered the North support in defeating the Lannisters. In return, Renly would recognize the North as a free kingdom once the war was won. It was a bold move, but both sides agreed. This one act, a handshake between the stag and the wolf, changed everything. News of the alliance spread quickly. The Riverlands, still burning from Lannister raids, welcomed the unity. The Tyrells, who had thousands of soldiers and rich lands, now felt stronger with both North and South behind them. Even the Stormlands, loyal to Renly, stood taller. When word reached King's Landing, Cersei's face turned pale. "The boy king is surrounded," she whispered to her brother Tyrion. "The wolf and the stag are coming." Tyrion, who always thought 10 steps ahead, began to worry. This is no longer a war of 5 kings. It's becoming a war of 2 sides, and we're the smaller one. Meanwhile, in Dragonstone, Stannis Baratheon sat in silence as his red priestess, Melisandre, warned him. "Your brother mocks the Lord of Light. He joins hands with the North and the old gods. He must be punished." But Stannis was not so quick to act. He knew his army was small, and now Renly had grown much larger with the help of the Starks. A storm was coming, and for once, Stannis did not feel ready. Back at River Run, Lady Catelyn finally smiled for the first time in weeks. Her son had found a powerful ally. Her husband's death would not go unanswered. The North was strong, and the South was finally willing to listen, but not everyone was happy. In the shadows of Renly's camp, whispers began. Sir Loras, Renly's lover, was not pleased with this alliance. He saw the Starks as cold, proud, and dangerous. He worried Renly was giving away too much, promising too many kingdoms for too little loyalty. Others, too, began to question the plan. The great mistrust, and not all hearts could be united with words alone. Still, for now, the banner of the wolf flew beside the golden stag, and across the kingdoms, people began to wonder what happens when the North and South fight as one. The banners of the stag and the direwolf flew side by side as Renly's host marched north to meet Robb's army near Harrenhal. The golden plains thundered with hooves and steel, and for the first time in years, 2 great armies shared a cause bigger than revenge, the fall of the Lannisters. Their camp was a sea of tents, firelight, and murmurs. Soldiers from the Reach, the Stormlands, the North, and the Riverlands mingled. Some joked about how a man from Dorne wouldn't survive a northern winter. Others argued over which gods were real, the old, the new, or the red. But beneath the laughter and the banners, unease lingered. Robb Stark was young, but not blind. He watched Renly closely, especially at night when the wine flowed and words ran loose. Renly was charming, generous, and liked by the men, but he was also used to getting what he wanted, and what he wanted was the crown. Robb, on the other hand, didn't care for the Iron Throne. He only wanted the North left alone. He wanted justice for Ned Stark's head, still rotting on a spike in King's Landing. But Robb knew. Men changed when thrones got closer. Catelyn saw it too. One night she sat by the fire with Renly, both sipping wine. "You smile easily," she said, "but smiles don't win wars." Renly raised his cup. "No, but allies do. You've given me something my brother Stannis never could, hearts that believe. The North rides with me now." Catelyn stared into the flames. "Just remember, my son rides with you, not beneath you." He chuckled, but something in his eyes shifted, just a flicker of pride. Or maybe warning. Far to the east, the raven flew. In King's Landing, Queen Cersei smashed a goblet when the raven arrived. Blood-red wine soaked her dress. "Robb Stark has joined Renly," she hissed. "And the Tyrells support them both. That's half the realm." Tyrion Lannister, now Hand of the King, stayed calm as usual. "Half the realm, yes," he said, "but not the throne. And power sits here, gold, the City Watch, and wildfire." But even he knew things had changed. The wolves had howled, and the South had listened. In Dragonstone, Stannis Baratheon brooded over the news. His knuckles were white, gripping parchment. Melisandre stood near him, quiet for once. "They mock your right," she said softly. "Your brother has taken wolves into his den. They will tear him apart." But Stannis wasn't listening. His pride was wounded deeper than ever. Renly was younger, weaker in his eyes, yet now had armies 3 times the size of his own. He turned to Sir Davos. "Send letters to the lords. Tell them I am the true king by law and fire. If they still kneel to Renly, they kneel to traitors." Back near Harrenhal, things were moving fast. Plans were drawn. Renly's march toward King's Landing would begin in days. Robb agreed to remain in the Riverlands to cut off any Lannister reinforcements from Casterly Rock. The plan was simple. Renly would strike the capital while Joffrey still wore the crown, and the North would block the West. But not everyone trusted the plan. At night, Lady Margaery met Catelyn in her tent. She was kind, well-mannered, but sharp. "You should know something," she said, her voice low. "Renly, he listens to many, but he trusts few. My brother Loras, he believes this alliance is a mistake." Catelyn looked at her. "Because we are Northmen?" "No," Margaery said, "because you're not loyal to the throne. Loras thinks you'll take your independence and disappear when it suits you." Catelyn didn't answer right away. She stared out of the tent toward Robb's campfires in the distance. He's not wrong. That same night, a shadow passed through the camp, silent. Unseen, it slid through Renly's tent. No one heard the whisper. Not until morning, Renly Baratheon lay cold in his bed, eyes wide open, throat cut from ear to ear. No one saw the killer. No one heard a thing. The alliance shattered in the blink of an eye. The Tyrells blamed the Starks. The Starks blamed the gods. Some whispered of shadows, others of poison. But nothing was clear. Only one thing was true. Renly Baratheon was dead, and the war had changed once again. Robb stood in silence as Margaery wept beside the body. Loras had to be held back from drawing his sword. Men shouted in the yard. The alliance teetered like a ship in storm. And from a distant tower, Catelyn whispered to herself, someone wanted this peace broken. But who? And why? The storm that night was unlike any before. Rain hammered the tents, and thunder rolled like the growl of an angry god. Robb Stark stood at the edge of the camp, soaked and silent. He stared into the darkness, heart heavy, mind spinning. Renly Baratheon was dead, and no one knew how, or maybe no one wanted to say Robb had seen death. He had lived through betrayal and loss. But something about Renly's death felt different, unnatural. The guards swore no one had entered the tent. No blade was found, no footsteps. Just a slit throat, clean and silent, like death had floated in on shadow. Lady Catelyn paced near the command tent, her cloak dripping water. She had known it. The moment Renly had smiled too easily, made promises too quickly, she had sensed it wouldn't last. But she didn't expect it to end like this. Not this fast, not this clean. Inside, voices screamed, "You murdered him!" Sir Loras roared, his eyes red with fury, blade drawn. You northern wolves couldn't wait to see him fall. Great your number stepped forward, sword ready. "Watch your mouth, boy. Accuse us again, and you'll follow him to the grave." Margaery stood between them, her face pale but calm. Enough. This will not bring him back. But it was too late. The camp was split. The Tyrells, furious and grieving, began packing. They would not march with the Starks. Not without Renly, not with so much suspicion in the air. By morning, the golden rose banners were gone. Robb sat with Catelyn, staring into a map, but not really seeing it. His voice was low. "They're going to King's Landing. They'll bend the knee to whoever gives them power now. Maybe even the Lannisters." Catelyn shook her head. "I don't believe Margaery would kneel to Cersei. She might if it means surviving. They lost their king. They need a new one. That's when the ravens flew again. Words spread like wildfire. Renly Baratheon had been killed by magic. Some said they saw a shadow in his tent, a figure with no face, a thing that melted through walls, and the whispers named one name again and again, Melisandre, the Red Woman from Dragonstone. The servant of the Lord of Light, Stannis Baratheon's priestess. She did this, Catelyn said, her voice cold. "I don't care what god she claims. She killed him." Robb clenched his fists. "Then Stannis did it. With her help. But no one will prove it. And the Tyrells won't care. They've already moved on. And just like that, the alliance that could have changed the war was gone." In the south, Margaery and Loras arrived at Highgarden. Their father, Lord Mace Tyrell, wasted no time. Within days, a raven was sent to King's Landing, and Cersei Lannister, ever the lioness, offered them a crown. Margaery would marry Joffrey. The wolf had been traded for a lion. Back at Riverrun, Robb summoned his bannermen. The dream of a united front was over. The war would go on, but now with more enemies than ever. He turned to his mother. "We trusted too quickly." "No," she said softly, "we trusted out of hope. But hope doesn't win wars." Then came another blow. Lord Roose Bolton returned from the south with news. The Lannisters were marching. Tywin had gathered new forces. And with the Tyrells now in alliance, their numbers were doubled. King's Landing would not fall easily. The gates were stronger, the walls higher, and the city now had wildfire, enough to burn fleets. And as if the gods weren't finished with Robb yet, the Freys sent a raven of their own. Lord Walder was insulted. Robb had broken his marriage pact, the one that promised a Frey daughter in return for crossing the twins. He had married Talisa Megier, a healer from Volantis, for love, and love had a price. Robb crushed the letter in his fist. "We've lost the Tyrells. We've angered the Freys, and the Lannisters grow stronger. Every move we make, they answer twice as hard." Catelyn looked at him, her heart aching. "Then we strike where they won't expect." But there were fewer options now. Fewer allies. And more eyes watching, and somewhere in the shadows, in a cave far from light. Melisandre whispered over a fire. She threw a leech into the flames, and another name burned on her tongue. Robb Stark. The days after Renly's death felt colder, even though summer still held the land. Robb Stark rode through the Riverlands, his eyes harder than before. Gone was the young king, full of fire and hope. What remained was a soldier, one who had seen how fast alliances fall, how quick smiles turn to blades. His army moved slower now, not because of distance, but because of weight. The weight of betrayal, of missteps, of mistakes made in the name of love. Talisa rode beside him often, her presence calming. She was kind, with a soft voice and healing hands. But her face, her foreign name, reminded the lords of the North and Riverlands of a different thing entirely. The broken Frey pact, and the Freys did not forget. At the twins, Lord Walder Frey sipped his wine and smiled his toothless grin as his sons gathered. He breaks his word, and now he'll come begging, the old man chuckled. A king who forgets his promises is no king at all, one of his sons leaned in. Shall we refuse them? Walder narrowed his eyes. No, we'll welcome them with meat, mead, and music, he grinned, slow and mean. Then we'll deal with the wolf. Far away, in Dragonstone, fire flickered in Melisandre's eyes. Another leech hissed in the flames. Joffrey Baratheon, she whispered. The shadows danced on the wall behind her, twitching like snakes. Stannis stood silently, hands behind his back, eyes locked on the fire. 2 kings remain, she said, and only one has been chosen. Back in the Riverlands, Robb called a war council. Lord Bolton, Lord Karstark, Blackfish Tully, all present. The map of Westeros stretched before them, but there were fewer friendly lands than before. Bolton spoke first. We must retake the west, strike at Casterly Rock. If Tywin is still in King's Landing, we take his home. Karstark disagreed. No, let the lion sit in his den. The Freys are our concern now. Mend that bridge, or we march with fewer men than we need. Robb leaned over the table, jaw tight. I made a mistake. But the Freys will listen. Blackfish shook his head. They might. But they'll charge a price, and it won't be gold. Robb looked up. Then I'll pay it. We need their support, and so a raven was sent. A formal apology. A request to visit the twins and offer peace between House Stark and House Frey. Walder's reply came quickly. He accepted. He even invited them all to a wedding. One of his daughters was to marry. Lord Edmure Tully, Catelyn's brother. A celebration, he promised. A feast to reunite old ties. Catelyn was uneasy. He agrees too fast, she whispered to Robb. Too easily. Robb squeezed her hand. We can't afford to fight everyone. We need allies, even if they smile with knives behind their backs. So they rode to the twins. The crossing was quiet. Too quiet. The Freys were polite. Cold, but polite. Walder met them with fake warmth. His daughters lined up like statues. None smiling Edmure did his duty. He married Rosalind Frey that night, a girl with sad eyes, but a kind smile. The feast was loud. Ale flowed. Laughter echoed. Even Robb laughed. He danced with Talisa, kissed her in front of lords and strangers. For a moment, it felt like peace. Like maybe the storm was behind them, but Lady Catelyn felt it again. That same chill she'd felt before Ned died. Before Renly was murdered. Before every fall. She watched Lord Roose Bolton too closely, and he noticed. He stood, nodded politely, and stepped outside the hall. That's when the music changed. It slowed. Grew sharp, offbeat, wrong. Catelyn turned to the musicians. One of them wore chainmail under his cloak. Her eyes widened. She rose, Robb, but it was too late. The hall erupted in screams. Crossbows fired from the balconies. Arrows sliced through air. Men fell choking. Talisa gasped, then collapsed, blood spilling across her dress. Robb shouted, charging toward her, but 3 bolts slammed into his chest. He fell to his knees, eyes wide, reaching for her hand. Catelyn grabbed a dagger, grabbed one of Walder's young wives, and screamed, "Let him go, or I kill her!" Walder Frey just sipped his wine. "I'll find another." Catelyn's scream echoed through the twins, and then silence. The Red Wedding had begun, and the king in the north was dead. The sun rose blood-red over the twins, but the light brought no warmth. Crows circled overhead. The air stank of iron, wine, and death. Inside the halls, where laughter had echoed the night before, bodies now slumped over benches and stone. Robb Stark lay cold on the floor, arrows buried deep in his chest, sword still in his hand. Talisa beside him, her eyes open but seeing nothing. And Lady Catelyn Stark, throat sliced, fingers stiff, silent forever. The North had lost its king, the Riverlands had lost its heart, and the Freys had won, or so they thought. In the days that followed, the Freys boasted of their cleverness. Walder Frey fed his pigs with the meat left over from the feast, laughing as he drank. His banners flew high. The Boltons were praised as new wardens of the North, with Rose Bolton named Lord of Winterfell. By decree of King Joffrey himself, the Lannisters sent golden thanks, calling it justice. Tywin Lannister smiled from his tower. His enemies were dying, and he hadn't lifted a sword. He simply used others' pride, pain, and pacts, but outside the walls of power, something was changing. The North did not forget, and it did not forgive. In the woods beyond the Neck, men whispered the name of the young wolf, with tears in their eyes. Blackfish Tully escaped the massacre, and began gathering what few loyal river lords remained. The Karstarks mourned despite their earlier anger. Even some Freys, the younger, quieter ones, looked away when they passed Robb's mutilated direwolf, Grey Wind, whose head had been sewn onto Robb's corpse for sport. But the truest vengeance did not come from lords or swords. It came from shadows. It came from Arya Stark. She had been close, too close. She and Sandor Clegane, the Hound, had arrived at the twins that very night, only to be turned away by blood and screams. Arya had seen the banners fall. She had watched the guards laugh. And in that moment something inside her broke. The girl with water dancer eyes was gone. Only the wolf remained. They escaped into the woods, but Arya no longer listened when the Hound spoke of caution. One night she killed a Frey soldier who bragged about sewing Grey Wind's head on Robb's corpse. She slit his throat while he slept, whispering, "The North remembers." Sandor just stared at her. "That one was yours," he muttered. "But keep count, girl, or you'll forget who you were." She didn't answer. She didn't care. She kept walking. Meanwhile, across the narrow sea, a different kind of fire stirred. In Yunkai, Daenerys Targaryen received the news of the Red Wedding from a merchant who thought it might amuse her. But she did not laugh. She stood by her balcony, looking down at the freed slaves, cheering her name. "They kill kings at feasts," she said, voice low. "Slaughter mothers, mock wolves with dead things. And they think they rule." Jorah stood beside her. "Westeros is ruled by cowards. But cowards fall fast." She looked at her dragons, growing stronger each day. "Let them feast while they can. When I return, they'll choke on fire and ash. But before fire could sail across the sea, I still had to bleed. Back in the north, Winterfell stood in ruins, burned, broken. The once proud heart of the Stark family now a shell of stone. The Ironborn had taken it. The Boltons had claimed it. And now no one ruled it. But not for long. Roose Bolton sent his bastard Ramsay Snow to clean the north. What followed was worse than war. Villages burned. Families vanished. Skinned bodies hung from trees. The Dreadfoot's banners, the flayed man, became a symbol of fear, but fear only lasts so long. In the wilds, the small folk whispered of rebellion, of a true Stark still alive, of a boy with a direwolf, of Bran, and above the wall that boy travelled deeper into the snow with Meera and Jojen Reed, following visions, hunted by wights and haunted by dreams. Dreams of wolves, of a tree with a face, of a three-eyed crow whispering the truth: "You will not walk, but you will fly." South of the wall, Jon Snow buried his dead and tightened his grip on the Night's Watch. He heard whispers from the south, of Robb, of Catelyn, of the Freys. He said nothing. But at night, when the wind blew hard across Castle Black, he'd stare into the flames and clench his fists so tightly. Blood would drip. His family was gone, but something colder lived on in him now. He had the north in his blood, and winter was far from over. A cold wind blew through the halls of the Dreadfort. Winter hadn't officially come, but its shadow stretched across the north like a claw. The flayed man of House Bolton flew proudly from every tower, but behind those walls the stench of rot lingered. Ramsay Snow, now calling himself Ramsay Bolton, had taken Winterfell, or what remained of it. The stone walls had been repaired, but the soul of the place was gone. No laughter, no warmth, no direwolves, only screams in the dungeons and blood beneath the floorboards. To the people of the north it was a haunted place now. But Ramsay didn't care. He was drunk on power, high on cruelty. He hunted women in the woods like animals, called it sport. He tortured men for smiling too long or not long enough. And Roose, cold and calculating as ever, let it all happen. This is how you control a kingdom. Rose told his son, watching as another terrified northern house bent the knee. Fear sharpens faster than love, but fear has a price. And the north, quiet, suffering, wounded, had not forgotten the wolves. Far to the east, on the quiet roads near the vale, a woman with grey eyes and a silent tongue walked alone. Her name was no one, but her memory was full of names. Walder Frey, Rose Bolton, Ramsay Snow, names on a list. Names to be crossed. Arya Stark had trained with the Faceless Men in Braavos, learning the art of disguise, poison, silence. But she had not forgotten her face, her name, her family. She had not forgotten the Red Wedding, and now she was heading west, to Westeros, to justice. Meanwhile, at the wall, the wind howled louder. Snow piled at Castle Black. Jon Snow stood on the ramparts, watching the white sky, waiting for something he couldn't name. Word had reached him of Robb's death, of Catelyn's, of what the Freys and Boltons had done. He showed no tears, no anger, but something inside him had cracked. Not broken, hardened, he trained longer now, spoke less, commanded more. The Night's Watch had suffered its own losses. The wildlings stirred beyond the wall, and something else, something far worse, was moving in the dark. One night, Sam brought him news, ancient scrolls, warnings from the past, tales of ice demons, of long nights, of dead things that walked. The White Walkers are real, Sam whispered. I've seen them. The dead don't stay dead up there. Jon stared into the fire. Then we need to be ready. No more games. No more South. The real war is coming, but the South had not stopped playing. In King's Landing, Joffrey Baratheon sat on the Iron Throne, wearing his crown like a child playing dress-up in a dead man's armor. His mother, Cersei, ruled from the shadows. Tywin Lannister ruled behind them both, but all of that cracked during Joffrey's wedding, the Purple Wedding. Laughter, wine, pigeons baked in pies. And then, choking, the boy king gasped, clawed at his throat. Eyes bulged, then silenced. Joffrey Baratheon died in front of half the realm, poison, and while Cersei screamed and blamed Tyrion and the city shook, a quiet smile crept onto the faces of many, one lion down. But justice does not sleep. In the Riverlands, Lady Stoneheart walked again. Catelyn Stark had not died quietly. Her body had been dumped in the river, but the Brotherhood without banners found her. Beric Dondarrion gave his life to bring her back. What rose was not the same woman. Her skin was pale, her throat slashed, unable to speak. But her eyes burned with rage. Now she rode with the Brotherhood, hanging Freys from trees, gutting Lannister men in the night, burning Boltons alive in their sleep. She was death in a mother's dress, and she would not stop. The war had changed shape. No longer banners and battles. Now it was whispers and knives in the dark. Now it was vengeance. Everywhere, the old powers frayed. The Tyrells, now tied to the Lannisters, began to doubt the alliance after Joffrey's death. Margaery was queen, but her grip was uncertain. Cersei grew more paranoid, more cruel. The High Sparrow and his followers stirred among the poor, preaching justice, humility, and revenge on the rich. Daenerys, across the sea, still built her power in Meereen. Her dragons grew larger. Her army, unsullied and freed slaves, stronger. But ruling was harder than conquering, and the ships to carry her to Westeros were still just a dream. But she too had heard of the Red Wedding, of the wolves dying, and she had whispered only one thing: let the lion roar. When I come, I'll burn his pride to ash. Night had fallen on the Riverlands, but the trees never slept. In the hanging woods near Oldstones, Frey men rode drunken and careless. They laughed about the Red Wedding, again, told the story like it was a bard's song. Robb's last breath, Catelyn's throat, the wolf's head on the boy king's body. They didn't know they were being watched. The torches flickered, a horse neighed in panic, and then one of the men gasped, a rope tightening around his neck, lifting him off the ground without a word. Another was dragged screaming into the dark, blades slicing his belly open like meat. The last tried to run, only to trip over a root and see her, pale, silent, throat torn, eyes burning like frozen fire, Lady Stoneheart. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. She dropped her blade slowly into his chest, and as the blood gurgled from his mouth, she carved a word into the dirt beside his corpse. Vengeance. Elsewhere, far north of the carnage, Bran Stark was no longer a boy. His legs still didn't work, but his dreams carried him where no feet could. He had reached the cave of the three-eyed raven, and the man waiting for him beneath the weirwood roots. The old seer taught Bran how to look back, how to see his father at Winterfell, his Aunt Lyanna at the Tower of Joy, his brother Jon as a child in a snow-covered cradle, and then how to look forward. He saw shadows with blue eyes marching past broken castles, dead men walking in silence, the wall trembling, the world turning white, and in every vision, he saw one truth growing clearer. The Great War had not even begun. South of the Wall, Jon Snow tried to prepare his brothers, but the Night's Watch was crumbling. Too few men, too many enemies. Wildlings gathered. The White Walkers grew bolder, and politics from the south still poisoned their purpose. When word came of Stannis Baratheon marching north to take the Wall, Jon wasn't sure whether to feel relief or dread. Then came another twist of fate. The brothers of the Night's Watch cast their votes, and Jon Snow was named Lord Commander. The boy bastard, the quiet one, now wore black not as a brother, but as a leader. But even victory came with a curse. South of the Neck, Roose Bolton tightened his grip on the north. With the Freys now officially his allies, he planned to legitimize his bastard Ramsay. He sent ravens across the land, declaring that House Bolton now ruled Winterfell by royal decree. But Winterfell still whispered of wolves, and when Roose announced a marriage, Ramsay to Sansa Stark, the north grew colder. Sansa, who had escaped King's Landing after Joffrey's death, had been taken in by Petyr Baelish, Littlefinger, the man who smiled with poison on his lips. He brought her north, claiming it was time for the Starks to reclaim their home. But Sansa was not returning to rule. She was being sold to a monster. The wedding happened fast. The screams came later. Ramsay Bolton showed. Sansa no kindness, no mercy. The girl who had suffered under Joffrey now faced a deeper horror. But this time, something inside her didn't break. It sharpened. She waited. She planned. And deep in the kennels, she whispered to Theon Greyjoy, the ghost of a boy who once betrayed her family. Now broken, shamed, called Reek. Help me, she said, or die with him. The north was waking. At sea, another storm brewed. Daenerys Targaryen had grown tired of playing queen in a land that wasn't hers. Her dragons were growing, burning. Her enemies multiplied. And though she had freed thousands, Meereen rotted beneath her rule. One night Drogon flew into the arena, great wings like thunder. He burned fighters, men, slaves, masters, then let her climb on his back, and together they flew into the sky. She disappeared into the horizon, but the fire had only just begun. Back in Westeros, the High Sparrow had risen in King's Landing, humbling the Lannisters and imprisoning Cersei. Margaery Tyrell was arrested too, and Tommen, now king, sat helpless. The realm was cracking, and in the shadows of Braavos, Arya Stark broke the rules of the Faceless Men. She took a life that wasn't hers to take. Meryn Trant, a butcher in armor. She stabbed his eyes, his gut, his throat, but punishment came fast. She was blinded, and yet she smiled through her. Tears, because she had crossed another name off the list. Winter was not coming anymore. It had arrived. Snow fell on Winterfell, covering the blood in white silence. The Boltons still ruled the castle, but the north was stirring, restless, angry, cold to the bone. Whispers moved faster than ravens. The last Stark girl was alive, and she was married to a monster. Ramsay Bolton was feared across the land, but not respected. He flayed men, hunted women for sport, and kept his soldiers in line with terror, not loyalty. His father, Roose, saw the cracks forming, but too late. When his wife gave birth to a true-born son, Ramsay did what bastards do when threatened. He fed them both to the dogs, and now he ruled alone. But not for long. Sansa had escaped. With Theon's help, she jumped from the castle walls and disappeared into the snow-covered forests. She was no longer the bird in a cage. She was a wolf, and wolves know their way home. She found Jon Snow at Castle Black, battle-hardened, grieving, freshly murdered and resurrected by the Red Priestess Melisandre. Yes, Jon had died, betrayed by his own brothers for choosing honor over borders. And when he came back, pale, changed, angry, he did not look back. "I failed," he told Sansa. "No," she said, gripping his hand. "You were killed for doing the right thing. That's not failure. That's strength." And so the two last true Starks, the bastard and the girl who learned survival, raised their banners. House Mormont, House Hornwood, House Mazin. Even the wildlings followed, because the North remembers, and now it fought back. The Battle of the Bastards was chaos, Ramsay's traps, Rickon's death, Jon buried alive beneath a mountain of bodies. Blood soaked into snow until the field looked red, and then the gates burst open. Sansa had written a raven to Littlefinger, and the Knights of the Vale thundered in, crushing Bolton forces under their silver-armored cavalry. Jon smashed Ramsay's face in with his fists. The man who had burned banners and broken skin begged like a rat. When Sansa visited him last, she didn't speak. She simply opened the dog cages. The monster was eaten by his own beasts. Winterfell was free, and the Starks ruled again. But the peace was short, because far to the south, fire had finally set sail. Daenerys Targaryen crossed the narrow sea, not with stories, but with 3 dragons, an army of unsullied Dothraki screamers, and ships from the Ironborn Rebellion. Tyrion Lannister stood at her side as Hand and Varys whispered behind every curtain. She burned the slavers of Astapor and the masters of Yunkai. Then she landed at Dragonstone, her family's ancient home, and with dragonfire she shattered the Lannister lines. King's Landing panicked. Cersei, now queen after all her children's deaths, unleashed wildfire across her enemies. But it wasn't enough. The city bled until the snow began falling in the south. The dead had broken through the wall. Bran Stark, now the three-eyed raven, returned to Winterfell. He revealed Jon's secret. He was not Ned Stark's bastard, but the son of Lyanna Stark and Rhaegar Targaryen. His true name, Aegon Targaryen. Jon, already allied with Daenerys against the White Walkers, was torn. He loved her, but he was the true heir to the Iron Throne. She burned cities. He bled for them, and the fire between them could not survive winter. At the Battle of Winterfell, the White Walkers arrived like a storm. Thousands of whites, Viserion, Daenerys, dead dragon, breathing blue fire, and the Night King, cold and silent, walking through corpses like a god, one by one. The great houses fell until Arya Stark, silent as death, leapt through the shadows and stabbed the Night King with a blade of Valyrian steel. He shattered, and the dead with him. But the game was not over. In King's Landing, Daenerys lost everything: her dragon Rhaegal, her closest friend Missandei, her control, and when the bells of surrender rang, she burned the city anyway. Women, children, innocents, all turned to ash. Jon stood in the ruins. "You've become what we fought to destroy." Daenerys only looked at the Iron Throne, untouched by fire, waiting for her. Jon kissed her once, then drove a dagger into her heart. The dragon wailed and flew away with her body. In the end, the throne was melted. Tyrion was imprisoned. Arya sailed west. Sansa became queen in the north, and Bran, cold, quiet, all-seeing, became king of the 6 kingdoms. Jon returned to the Wall, not as a brother, but as a ghost of a man. No crown, no family, just snow and silence, and a promise that winter always returns. The Game of Thrones was over, but the scars never healed. The war changed everyone, and peace came not through crowns, but through fire, blood, and the memory of wolves.